Hey everyone, welcome back to yet another episode of the Infinite Tavern podcast. This is your host Anurag or Raghav, as known by the common folk, and I have my co host Amaan with me. We have another amazing guest today, Shubham, who I've known from the Daisies and Dragons Discord server, which is the biggest TTRPG community in India at this point. And yeah, I've seen him make a couple of announcements, and him being the moderator, I've interacted a couple of times with him regarding paid games, and yeah, he's helped me a lot with that. Shubham, if you could just introduce yourself.
Hello everybody. Good question. Introducing myself. Yeah, I'm the co-founder of Daisies and Dragons. I'm also a writer for TTRPGs. I do a lot of world building and kind of adventure design, and I'm also a narrative designer for video games. And before all of this, I was a writer in films. I was a screenwriter. I wear a lot of hats. Most of them seem to have some form of writing attached to them. And yeah, I spend a lot of my time behind my desk just juggling these different shows. And I'm happy to be here. Anorak has been a mainstay in Daisies and Dragons game announcement LFG. Every week at least, you will see a post from Anorak going, "Here's another game," and I'm like, "This guy's a machine. How is he able to run so much stuff?" Meanwhile, I'm like barely getting a game in every 3 months. So yeah, I'm happy to chat with all of you and see where this conversation goes.
Well, I did post a couple of games very frequently in Desis, especially
Uh-huh.
around the month that I joined. I tried to even have a whole D&D reenactment of the Lord of the Rings, which obviously did not
You
pan out.
did?
I did try that. I did get all the members. I created character sheets for every single character of the Fellowship.
Oh, wow.
But at that point, I think scheduling was the BBEG back then for me. I mean, it
That's
is even
always the
now, but
BBET.
Yeah. What's it? Tolkien didn't know back then, but the Dark Lord is actually just scheduling.
absolutely, absolutely.
So,
So, Shubham, how did you get into TTRPGs though?
I owe all of this to a friend of mine in university. So basically, my family moved to South Africa like when I was in ninth standard, and then when I got to college over there, I had a friend who was like, "Hey, let's play Pathfinder," which is back then I didn't know anything about TTRPG. So he's like, you guys get to be like cool characters from all these fantasy books you love. So I was like, okay, sure. And so we drove to a friend's house, and he was house sitting for another friend. So we had like the whole place to ourselves for the weekend. And he has like 11 cats and two dogs, and this big
Wow.
house with like it was a bungalow, and we had the whole space to ourselves. And so we just made our characters, and I made a very, 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 very cliche rogue. Dwarven rogue who did not talk to anybody, who sulked, who was like all stealthy and cool. And very quickly realized that that was not fun because he rolled a one when trying to stealth, and so
Oh,
he just landed up embarrassing himself constantly. But also, he just didn't have anything to do once he was alone by himself. So by the time we played again, I turned into a ranger, and like, or rather, this was Pathfinder, so I turned into like a samurai, actually, Ronin samurai, which was interesting. And I now had an oath, and I was like more loyal to my party and stuff like that. But that's how I got into it, and I played that game for 4 years, maybe a bit more than that, and then I stopped because I had my masters and I was too busy studying and getting that stuff done to be able to play. And I never got back into that campaign, but then I came back to India and I was like, well, I still want to play. So then I did like 3 to 4 attempts at getting my friends over here to play Pathfinder and then Dungeons and Dragons. And 3 attempts failed, and the fourth one clicked. And then we started playing this long campaign that's been going on forever since like 2017, 2018. Um, and so that's been like my slow journey into TTRPGs. And then obviously once D&D became a thing, then I slowly expanded into other games and stuff like that.
That is, I mean, I did try, Pathfinder once. I think one of our, server members. So I think Arachnid was running a first edition game,
Yeah.
and I played a bard in that. I mean, I always go for a bard, obviously my
Mhm.
favorite class. And there was this one particular spell that appealed to me. It's called Coin Shot. Absolutely love that spell.
Yeah.
Just because
Yeah.
it's so cool. You just control three coins that just shoot out at people. And
Yeah.
I introduced that in my D&D campaign as well. I created the whole spell on D&D Beyond and
Yeah.
asked players if they're interested if to get that spell for themselves.
Anorak told me about the coin shot spell from Pathfinder. It reminded me of Mistborn.
Yep, that's
Dragons
the
and
first thing that came to my mind as
yeah,
well. Mistborn. I was like, this sounds like a great way to play a literal coin shot. That's what they're called in the
yeah,
books as well.
exactly.
So I wouldn't be surprised if someone at the Pathfinder Paizo team was actually inspired by Sanderson's work and decided to create that spell based on that. Yeah, honestly, man, Pathfinder is great. And like first, I've landed up writing adventures for the second edition, and when I was re-familiarizing myself with the rules and how the game worked, I really loved how it managed to make me feel like I had something to do every round, which was something that I often kind of was as a person who loves playing melee characters. I'm not really someone who plays a lot of magic characters. I love playing like a samurai, a fighter, things like that. So then often I would have these things where at high levels I was just like, I hit once, I hit a second time, I missed both times. Okay, well, next turn. And I'll see you guys in like after six other people have gone. And that could feel a little uninteresting for me. And I liked how Pathfinder was able to change it up and just give me a lot more to do. So that became like a attractive part of that game.
That's
Right.
cool. I mean, just circling back a bit of what you said earlier. You
Sure.
said when you came back to India, you tried to run a Pathfinder, then you tried to run Dungeons and Dragons, and it worked on the fourth time.
Hmm.
Did you? How did you manage to find the people to play with? Were you like, "Hey, this is a great game. This is how you played. Wanna play?" Or were there people already aware, somewhat, what's
It
going
was the
on?
same group that I kept trying to get them to play TTRPGs. I was just very persistent. I was like, you guys are my friends. You're the only people I know in this damn city. Okay. And so you're going to play this with me. And the thing is, okay, they had heard all my stories from my Pathfinder days. They had heard all the adventures that my character Killian had gone on. So they did find the idea very appealing. The reason we had struggled to play before that was just I didn't know how to run games that well back then. So there's a lot of stumbling blocks in those early days. And secondly, I think there was a lot of expectation setting that had to change. So by the time we got to the fourth time around, I actually had planned a bit of the campaign. I sent everyone a specific email saying like, this is the world, this is the premise, who's interested, and I kind of reel them in a little bit with that kind of practice of just kind of creating the sense of mystery and aura. And then after that, I actually took like a month to just work with everyone on their characters before I even got to the point where I was like, let's play the game. So we walked into the first session a bit more confident about what we were going to do, how we were going to play, how often we were going to play. I think a lot of those things required adjustment, but I don't think everyone runs into the same issues. It was more the fact that I decided to take people who don't normally play any TTRPGs and go, I'm going to make this happen. I think, for example, if you come on the Daisies and Dragons server and you post in the LFG, it's a far simpler process and you're far more likely to just get a
Yeah.
table going because everyone's already bought into the idea of like, I want to role play and I want to be something. Out here, there was like an initial learning curve of going, you could be this character from this thing. What do you want to play? What is your motivation? There's just a lot of legwork before that, right? So yeah.
That's actually a very patient way to, let people into this whole community. Yeah.
Yeah, my because me your story, right, while very similar to mine, is a lot different. I mean, I didn't take my time to get them into this. I was like, it's my birthday and you people are my only friends, just play it for my birthday. It's the only gift you could actually give me. And yeah, I mean, I nagged them a little bit, they agreed. So I created a 72 slide PowerPoint presentation on D&D.
Wow. That
A
is
70.
70. I That sounds like such a game master thing to do as well, though. Like
Yeah.
that's why you're the game master. You decided to do a 72. That just reads like someone like that. I love
Yeah,
it.
I created the whole thing for them. Then that day itself, no, they wanted to create characters. So we created a few characters. I think we had a human fighter, gnome monk, and a dragonborn druid called Stephen. That is the only name that stood out to me. A dragonborn druid. And after that, that day itself, they just wanted to play the first session. So I ran the first part of the Lost Mines of Andalore for them.
Nice. Classic. Yeah.
While you were talking about what was your first time sort of
Sure.
DMing, where Anorak was saying and where you were saying, see, I refer to him as Anorak.
All right. Yep. Yep.
I can't in my for the life of me even
Raghav,
think of
who?
him as, yeah, who is that guy?
Love it. Yeah.
So it was literally courage it took for me. Like I'm proud of how much courage it took for me to actually run a game, because I did so much preparation for a damn one shot,
Hmm.
which I, in hindsight, hindsight's 2020.
Mm.
So I could have just winged it,
Yeah.
but I did way too much preparation. Like Anorak, I also
Yeah.
made like a PowerPoint presentation
What a bunch of nerds.
with a bunch of buttons where it led to different rooms of the dungeons. And
Wow.
I was so over prepared, and we didn't even do like one third of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
We got, and at the moment we were like 3-4 hours in, and I
Yeah.
could get the feeling that okay, I have to wrap this up, I have to improvise.
Yeah.
That's probably what DMing is.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, the reason I even pointed at the starter set is because Fandelver and the starter set, both of them, Anurag, you were talking about Fandelver, they're both great ways to just start playing and have that 72 slide presentation ready for you in a book. Like, I think that's the one good thing about,
Mhm.
one particularly good thing about kind of these early stage books is that you can just start playing something that someone's written and designed for you. And you're right, because the next thing that happens as soon as after you finish planning and everything, and about 5-10 minutes into your first session, is it all goes off the rails and the players are doing something
Absolutely.
completely unexpected. And so you very quickly realize that a lot of that prep is not really designed for the nature of the game. Like TTRPGs are not, they're not a pre-written story, right? They are a story that you're figuring out as you play. And so over prepping or kind of this kind of really planning it out kind of can actually stifle your thing. And I found that one of the reasons why early attempts at running these games struggled is because I was doing that. I was going, this is what the game is going to be like, and I wouldn't allow the flexibility for the players to just go do wild stuff. And even after we started playing the fourth time around and we got into a good rhythm, it took me a long time to grow as a dungeon master, as a game master, and kind of become okay with just not seeing the world play out the way I thought it would. And so, yeah, 100%. I think just starting with someone else's adventure is in that way a very, very good idea, because when players ruin it, you don't feel that bad. And I say ruin it because there's something that I think as game masters, we start holding dear about the world, right? We're like, oh, I want you to have this moment where you feel this surprise, this revelation, or I want to introduce you to this really cool thing. And you're like, oh, I have this really cool dragon I want to introduce you to, and scare you guys with. And then they two hit the dragon, and you're like, okay, well that sucks, because now the fun of it for me was going to be like how terrifying the dragon was. You were going to win, but I want you to feel the terror, and now that didn't happen. So then there's a part of you that feels very bummed out about it. Um, and when you're running someone else's adventure, it's like, you know what? That's fine. It's just the adventure, and I'll turn the page and something else will happen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because the first day I ran that, they spent the entirety of the first session just shopping. They just shopped. That's it.
Of course. Yep. I have two players in my campaign who they like to do two things: the banter and like basically just shit talk for a while. And when they if they get into a fight like with enemies, they will want to do like really cool stuff. But other than that, they are not interested in any role play. The only thing they want to do is go buy cooler weapons and cooler armor. And I'm like, you bought it last session. What do you expect the blacksmith to have done by this session? Like, how is he supposed to magic you another legendary piece of weapons? Just play the other things in the world. They're like, nah, we want better stuff. There's also a video game mentality to it, right? There is I finish a quest, I'll go up and get better upgrades, and you want a sense of that, what's it, improvement or
Progress.
yeah, progress on a every quest basis, which isn't really how I think a lot of like Dungeons and Dragons or even Pathfinder work. Other games do. I think there are other games that reward you. They narratively reward you as you go along, so it's easier to make feel that's progress, but not with D&D. And that's okay. You just have to set your expectations.
So you said you've had your friends here over, and you ran games for them. But how did
Sure.
that evolve into creating one of the biggest communities in India?
That there was no real correlation between the two. What actually happened was the pandemic was going on, and as a screenwriter, I was out of work because the film industry wasn't making anything. Everything was just being shelved, and so there was a course that back then it used to be known as the RPG workshop or writer workshop. Now it's called the Storytelling Collective. And they had a course which was for writing your first adventure. And I was like, well, whatever, it's free. I'll sign up for it and I'll learn how to write your own adventure. That could be interesting, right? And so I happened to just do the course and I wrote my first adventure and I barely got it in on time. But that kind of made me go, huh, writing and publishing your adventure is a thing you can do. It might not make a lot of money, but I'm anyway pretty much stuck between work, so I could self-publish and get like a few dollars here and there, which is still nothing to scoff at. And so I started doing that, and I did the classic thing which any young Indian writer who's getting into fantasy wants to do is I was like, well, if I'm going to write this, I want to see what ancient Indian inspired mythological stuff would be like. So I actually started building out like a team. I sent out an email for like, hey, who wants to work on a campaign setting for like a ancient India play, kind of thing. And I got a bunch of people who responded. It was like 30 people or something that responded who wanted to work on this, right? And I was building out this team of writers and designers and interviewing people. And I very quickly realized that this project had already become bigger than I had the bandwidth to manage, because it meant that I would have to get like I would have to get incorporated because I would be publishing something legally. It would also be based on mythology, so there would be legal coverage that I would need, and there would just be a lot of stuff to tackle. And that part of the process, I was like, I think I'll come back to this when I feel I'm more equipped than trying to make this big publication thing happen right off the bat. But along the way, what happened was I landed up meeting Chirag and Indrani, the other two co-founders of Daisies and Dragons, and we just started talking about like, well, creating a campaign setting is one thing, but one of the things is in India, the whole TTRPG scene is pretty small, and so we're like, how do you make that grow? And you're like, well, Discord's where you would play games, so maybe we could do streams and then attract people to the server, and they could play games with each other, and we can show them how to play, and it would just become this thing where essentially you have an online community because everyone's already at home because of the pandemic, and they will hopefully, discover TTRPGs. And that was, I think, at the first, that was our only goal. We were like, hey, let's stream and make the Indian community visible on an international stage, and also give people across India and the diaspora to come play games with each other. And that's about it. And then we'll see where it goes. We don't need to try to do more than that. Before us, Panic Not already existed. Panic Not was a Mumbai-based community that hosted in-person events. But they were focused on in-person. So we were like, yeah, we'll focus on the online stuff because, again, lockdowns, right? And honestly, we just started with that. We just started with the server and the stream. And then initially, the first few, I would say, months of the thing, the server was all right. It had like some activity. We had a few people who were playing games, but it didn't see like massive influxes instantly. And our stream also, like, we would have a few viewers here and there. But what kept happening was that the longer we stuck around, the longer we kept Daisies and Dragons a thing and promoted it here and there, and did like a stream with Rohan Joshi, and like did other streams with other people in the TTRPG space internationally, the more it kind of just became a thing that people heard about. And so people kept discovering it. Whenever Dungeons and Dragons came in the news, if people looked for like Indian Dungeons and Dragons community, we would turn up. We got like published, interviewed in some newspapers and things like that. So again, that gave IGN India, stuff like that. So again, it just gave us a little bit more of that publicity that gave people a chance to discover us. And then everyone else did the work. Like our moderators and the community does most of the work in terms of keeping the server, like you said, the biggest community in India. It's their work because they come and they play games, they look after each other. Indrani, Chirag, and I, we kind of just try to facilitate that wherever possible. So a lot of that then after that was self-sustaining, I would say.
I used to try to find players on this app called Clubhouse. Just go around, talk to people. I found a few people, and we played a whole campaign. And one of the players itself, he, recommended me to join Daisies. And after that, the rest is all
Nice.
history. I found TPK, I found Panic Not, and Reroll.
Yeah.
And after that, I thought, why not create another server? Since I run a lot of games, I thought, my regular
Yeah.
players could, get into the server and just play along.
Yeah, and I mean that's really kind of like the place where we want to be. Daisies and Dragons doesn't have like our internal goal isn't like, hey, we need to stay the biggest or we need to be kind of always growing and becoming bigger and bigger. That's not really a goal we have. We for example don't earn any money, right? Like this is completely everyone's just volunteering their time and running the server just because they want to see it grow. The growth is essentially making sure that when people enter the hobby, whether it's in India or the diaspora or just generally, when they enter the hobby, they have a space that they can come and learn about the hobby, engage it, and find other like minded people and have a good time, a safe and welcoming time. I think it's more important for us to facilitate that than to be like the next big thing. There have been times I think in the past where people have talked about like friends will hear about what we are doing and they'll joke like, oh, you guys want to be the next Critical Role, and we're like, no, there's no way we're becoming the next Critical Role, and that's not even a goal, right? Like, why would we love Critical Role, we love watching it, but that's a very different thing. That's professional voice actors playing Dungeons and Dragons, and they've made a publishing industry out of it, and a studio out of it, and a whole thing, and that's a very different thing from building a community space for players to come and just discover and engage the hobby, right? That doesn't exist in India. We don't have like 20 gaming shops that you can come play Magic the Gathering and other TTRPGs at. There aren't like a bunch of bookstores you can meet up at and play games. So then this kind of becomes the one way where people from all across India, because that's the other thing, you have people from Hyderabad, you have people from Mumbai, you have people from Bangalore, you have people from like small towns in different parts of India whose names I don't even know, just coming and playing it. That's amazing. That's I think what we really just want to facilitate. And if we lock out at like the number we have right now, whatever the number is, and that's the only number of people in the community, but they all feel like they can come play games and have fun and then do their own thing, like Anorak go start their own server, start a podcast, get into game design and start designing games, any of these things, or running games professionally. If they discover any of that through us, amazing. That's job well done, mission accomplished. I'm happy to go to sleep after that. I don't want to do anything after that. So I'm really glad that Anorak was able to kind of build something out of this. That's the dream, I think.
Yeah, I mean, far as discovering TTRPGs and the Indians and the diaspora discovering TTRPG goes, the name Desis and Dragons really helped me find a
Yeah.
community there, because
Yeah.
I was struggling, man. I
Yeah.
was struggling when I first got interested in TTRPG properly. I didn't know if anybody played TTRPGs in India
Yeah.
at all. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't feel like, okay, I might be the only one. I didn't feel that at all, but
Yeah.
I didn't know
1.5
how
billion
to.
people. There has to be somebody
Exactly.
else, right?
There has
Yeah.
to be somebody. So I need to find them.
Yeah.
So I found Panic Not. I found a couple of their actual plays that they recorded a
Yeah.
long time ago
Yeah.
on YouTube. But then I was like, where can I find a
Yeah.
community? And unfortunately, I was not a Discord user at that point in time.
Yeah.
So that made it even more difficult.
Mhm.
I got into Discord for some other thing, and then I discovered, DCs, TPK, and then Infinite.
Nice.
I think that's has mostly been a common journey with a lot of people and a lot of players that I know. And DCs, again, it's always there, and like I said before, the name really helps in
Yeah.
finding
And I mean,
the community.
100%. And that was a strategic choice, right? Like when we were thinking about what are we going to name ourselves, there were a lot of ideas that were considered. I don't remember any of them, but it felt like the most obvious choice was Daisies and Dragons, because even though we want to represent a lot of TTRPGs, Dungeons and Dragons is the most popular one. So the parallel was like useful for us. And then again, Daisies, it just meant that people kind of knew almost a little bit instinctively like what to expect in terms of like our goal of like being a space specifically for people from India and the diaspora in general. And like it was a trade-off, because obviously now you kind of do end up feeling like sometimes people will join and they're like, hey, I'm not Indian, can I hang around here? Yes, of course you can. You're more than welcome to. It's not like this is an Indian only space, but the goal is obviously to encourage a Indian community, or like encourage the growth of the hobby in the Indian community. And so that name, like you said, it was a strategic choice, and I'm glad that it paid itself through.
So I wanted to know your story, because you come from a sort of a filmmaking background. That's more or less the same for me. You went into writing adventures, into writing games, game design and everything. How did that trajectory in your career went? From from being a filmmaker to writing games, or running TTRPG for a living. How was that
Yeah.
like?
I mean, in one way, there's something that's not changed is that both of them are a struggle, right? Like, I don't
Yeah.
think any of them pay or are as lucrative as like a more conventional career path that, you know, any parent will usher you towards would be. But I
Yeah.
was lucky to have parents who were like, no, go do film if that's what you want to do. And so I got into film. And then because I moved back to India, I didn't have connects over here. And Bollywood is an industry where you need to know people to get work. Honestly, any industry is a place where you need to know people to get work.
Yeah.
Uh, but particularly Bollywood. So the struggle, I mean, I struggled as a production assistant, I struggled as an editor, production manager. I did a bunch of stuff. I did I was part of AIB First Drafts, kind of like residency. So I did that for 6 months and even honed in my writing more. But then AIB was a thing of the past, and I moved on, etc., etc. And honestly, moving to TTRPGs was very much like a sideways step, and just like I have time because there's not enough film work coming in, and this feels different. And I can just, you can't self publish a script. You can't write a short film and just put it out there and be like, buy this for $2 and 10 people can buy it for $2 and that's okay.
Yeah.
You can't do any of that. So TTRPGs felt like a thing where I could write a nice adventure, tell a story that I still wanted to tell, and then just put it out there. And honestly, I didn't get that much work for a very long time. It was more because Indrani, who had built up Nonagon Dice, was actually growing more and more. And Nonagon, I mean, the popularity of her dice was incredible, and her ability to build a community and network was also incredible, and still is. And it's one of the other reasons. Like we say, Daisies and Dragons grew because of the name, but a large part of its reputation also came from the work Indrani was able to do in establishing it on the international level, right? So while locally you can totally discover it because of the name Daisies and Dragons, internationally, when we are able to contact other people in the community and talk to them and interview them, a lot of that is because of like
Yeah.
the visibility we have gained. Because of Indrani's work, really. So when she co-signs it, people are like, okay, if we like Indrani, we trust Indrani, or go, we will also think that Daisies and Dragons is a good choice. I was still doing the writing an adventure here and there, but once Daisies and Dragons grew, and people saw that I was writing adventures, then a few more people reached out and they were like, hey, would you like to write something that would for our game that would be maybe inspired by like your cultural experience, not specifically like Hindu mythology or anything like that, but just your cultural identity. And so I landed up writing a city state that was inspired by like Revolution era Mumbai. I called it Kalbali.
Mm.
And then I got a really great gig, which is the Confluence RPG, where they were just like, hey, you look like, they interviewed me and they were like, we really like your writing. We want you to do a bunch of world building for us. Um, and it's going to be a whole new world. So you don't have to specifically do like inspired from India, just come write cool new things, right? And I started doing that not last year, 2022 November, and I basically did started that project. Was amazing, and we've been still developing it, and now they've made me the creative lead for that project. And they're like, yeah, we want you to finish developing this world and working with the rest of the team. I have an incredible team. It's not like I'm writing the whole world by myself. I have 6 other writers, and it's 15 people in total. It's a whole process. Um, but yeah, it was a honestly, I stumbled into it after the adventuring part. Like a lot of it was like someone else noticed me because of Daisies and Dragons, or because of Nonagon mentioning me, or someone else mentioning me and going, hey, would you be interested? And then I would send them my samples and like, yeah, cool, come write for us. Um, and video games, the same thing. I wanted to do write for video games, but it's, again, you don't just get video game writing work. You need to
Yeah.
know people the same way you need to know people in Bollywood, the same way you need to know people in TTRPGs. And I just, you know, my name was put forward in the right time, right place, and someone was like, "Hey, you need this written? Why don't you talk to this guy? He writes for TTRPGs, but I bet he could write it for a video game." And they were like, "Yeah, well, let's check it out." They checked out my work, and that's the other side of the thing, right? Like, 100% someone needs to know about you and you need to know the right people, but then you also need to have the work to show for it. And I had like 20 samples of different kinds of writing, right? Like a little bit
Hmm.
of world building and adventure, a campaign setting, what do you call it, a short film script, a few poems, a short story. I had all of this sitting around that I'd just been writing and churning out over the years. And so whenever someone was like, "Hey, can you come write for us? Do you have some samples?" I would send them all of this, and they would be like, "Okay, yeah, cool, you can do it, come through." And even then, mind you, the 10 jobs I applied, 9 of them don't come back to me. So
Yeah,
I,
isn't that true for every?
yeah, and I just don't want to give this perception of like, "Oh yeah, once I found this, it was totally easy going and I'm making big bucks." It's still a damn struggle. There are days where I'm pulling just not a lot of hours, but I'm tired and I'm not sure if I'm making enough money to make ends meet. And it can be a bit of a, and there are months where, for example, you are in between contracts, so you're not getting any pay. Um,
Mhm.
so I've had all of that. Moving from Bollywood to TTRPGs or video games hasn't really changed that. But the two things that have happened is more people are likely to hire me in TTRPGs and video games because I have more of a reputation thanks to my work with Daisies and Dragons,
Mhm.
and that kind of space. Whereas Bollywood, I just didn't have anything to my name, right? And the second thing is that people are more interested in the kind of stories I want to tell because both of these spaces are more interested in science fiction and fantasy. And screenwriting, that world is not that interested in, at least in India, in Bollywood, they're not that interested in science fiction and fantasy, either because of budgets or just they think the audience isn't ready for it. So a lot of the stuff that I would be pitching wouldn't be landing anywhere. And that kind of changed when I got to tabletop and video games. They were like, "Oh yeah, we want your wacky
Mhm.
ideas. Come do that." So long answer, but hopefully that gives you an idea. I always want to be careful not to make it seem like it was, everything's easy and everyone should move to this. You really need a lot of backing to be able to survive in this industry. It's a
Mm,
privileged position.
no, I totally get that. I mean, the way you articulated, how, it's not a easygoing thing. Like once you get in, it's not like you'll continue to stay in.
Mm.
Even a lot of the biggest TTRPG and D&D content creators I follow, most of them have a full-time job or have different contracts or do a
Yeah.
lot of different sort of freelancing to be able to do this hobby, because anyway it started for all of us as a hobby,
Mhm.
and some of us are lucky enough to earn
Yeah.
something from it. But we still have, well, let me put it this way, a lot of them still need to have a consistent backing through some other source to be able to continue to do that.
Yeah. When I was moving more and more into TTRPGs, I was still doing a bunch of writing, screenwriting assistant work. Like
Hmm.
I was earning pennies, but I was doing a bunch of research work for other writers. And that's also why I got into paid games, where I started running games on Start Play, because it was one way to pay the bills, right? Like I could just
Yeah.
run games and pay the bills. But even that, like, it's none of this is something I'm going to recommend someone do just on a whim. Like, you got to really plan it, and you really got
Yeah.
to set your expectations that it's a, I would say, 5+ year process to become somewhat stable in, right? If not 10. Like, your mileage will vary.
Definitely.
I mean, I did try, start playing dot games. I've run one game on that,
Yeah.
and during that game, I've had, pretty veteran players. I've had players who've been playing
Yeah.
since the 70s.
Yeah. 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 Those
And
are the ones I landed up with as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
and honestly, it was a little intimidating as well
Yeah.
to run for them. And one of the players, he just fell asleep while playing it. And
Wow.
I could hear him snoring through the microphone. I had to mute him in order to, just finish the game
That's
by then.
crazy.
And
I,
another time, a guy just asked me to teach him D&D,
all right.
and he actually paid me for that. And yeah,
Yeah.
those are the only two interactions I had on that. And
Yeah.
ever since I've tried, running a campaign, but yeah, no takers.
Yeah, I mean, see, the start playing thing, it works, but so it's interesting because on one side, the people who are there are already willing to pay, right? So you don't have to convince someone that you have to pay. They have to pay you to run a game. And it's a very different approach to the thing. They essentially, people are like, I want a curated, experience playing one of these tabletop games, and so I'm willing to pay for it because I rather ensure that I'm going to get whatever I'm signing up for than risk something at an LFG and maybe not have the experience I want. So it's someone who's already changed their approach, right? Like LFGs are great, but maybe like you said, there's a lot of times people who have jobs that are like 9 to 5s, and they're like, I have one Friday evening where I can play, and I want a regular group, and if everyone's paying, they're going to turn up. So I rather just pay and also just have that. Other times it's like veterans who are like, I don't want to go on Discord and figure out how to be in these young spaces and do Discord stuff. I just want to play the game, right? So there's a few different kinds of audiences that you land up with, um, and it's I mean it's a great I think it's a great part of the tabletop economy because GMs do put in a lot of work. And if there are people who are willing and capable to pay for it, that's great. If they and especially because the GM's agreeing to create a curated experience for you, right? It's very different from like I'm hanging out with my friends and playing. Like that's its own promise, and then I want to play, quote unquote, play tabletop. I want to role play. I want to do combat. That's a very different thing. And so if someone's paying for it and getting that, great. The problem becomes that largely most of the players are based in the US, which means that India time zones are just brutal. If you want to run games, you want to run games at 2 o'clock at night for India, right? Or 4 o'clock in the morning. I was running games at 5 o'clock in the morning, and oh man, that is tiring. Waking up and the first thing you do is get in the chair and you run a game for four people in a different time zone, and you do that for like 3-4 hours. So you from 5 to 9 you're running a game. The money is good because you can charge, like I think I was charging 20-25 USD maybe. And so for each one, so for 4 hours of work I would have gotten like $100, which is nice because that translates to about 8 grand. That's great, right, in terms of earning money. But the toll it takes on you to be able to run that, also the fact that you'll have maybe two of these games running a month, which means you're running maybe 4 games max. That's not nearly enough, like, income to keep sustaining yourself indefinitely on. You can't, and sometimes players cancel. If one player cancels, the others are like, well, I don't want to play without this person. So now you just don't have that money coming in. So there's a lot of variables, and so I don't really recommend it for people in India to do it like as their go-to. But if you're young and you have time and you're up for waking up early or staying up late and running games, yeah, go for it. It's a good way to get. I mean, look, if you're 20 and if you're running 4 games, 4 sessions a month, and you're getting 16 grand out of it, that's a good amount of money for a 20-year-old to be getting. Like, just for running 4 games, take that money and run, right? But if you're, a career professional, and I mean, if you're staying in an expensive city like Mumbai, and then one of those sessions gets cancelled on you, now you've gone down from 16 to just 12, and then another session cancelled on you, so you just have 10 or less, 8K. That's not good. That's a tough
hard.
spot to be in. Yeah, so there's a lot of struggle there if you're from India, and this is true. This is generally the issue with being from the South Asia, is that if you're from the global South, which is Southeast Asia, South Asia, or even parts of Africa, I mean, and honestly, most of Africa, just the way the global economy is split, what happens is that the economic centers are in the West. They are in US, UK, Canada, those kind of places. And so everything works according to their time zones. People are usually funding projects over there. Um, you know, all your big studios, everything is set up over there. And so if you're someone from this side of the world trying to make way into any of these industries, even though you are happy to contribute from your perspective and that might be valuable, being noticed, being able to tap into the same hours, same pay, it's really tough. There are always going to be issues of, not always, I mean, we're trying to change this, but you're going to have issues where either they're like, oh, we want to hire someone from the global south because their rates are going to be lower because the dollar is going to be more powerful, right? So there'll be this thing of like, I don't have to pay you as much as I would have to pay someone in America because you don't need that much money because your economy cost of living is lower. That's not technically fair in any sense of the word, but that's how they often might think. So that's going to work against you. But now, say you get lucky and you still get someone who's willing to pay you a US equivalent salary. You still have other challenges in that when are you going to join their meetings? Are they going to have meetings at 5 o'clock in the evening their time? If they're kind enough to do that, then that means you're still waking up at 5 o'clock your time to just sit in on a meeting, right? So you have those kind of challenges where um, it's great to have the work, but now you're not working by normal hours. You're not having a 9 to 5. You're having a 5 to, I don't know, 7, and then that's unhealthy for your social life, your mental wealth, and those kind of things. So then you have those hurdles. Then, not to mention, anytime you want to get a project made, like say you guys want to go make a Indian campaign setting and you want to publish it and you want to Kickstarter it. You can't have a Kickstarter in India. You need a American publisher to agree to publish your work, and then you can put it on Kickstarter through them. So you can have a really good game idea, but getting it out there, you have to find someone in US, and now they have to believe in your idea, and they have to see why is it interesting for your perspective to be published, right? Is there any money in it? And that's a whole different hustle. Like you look at Momotos, who's the Southeast Asian game designer. They've created games like Ark, and they have another one coming to Kickstarter soon. And their games are incredible. They have come up with entirely new games by themselves. Beautiful art, beautiful layout, really cool ideas. But like the struggle to get those games seen by the larger community is very real, and that's entirely because they're coming from the Southeast Asia, and the market is just skewed that way because of a lot of things. It's the same reason why when you're interacting with someone on Reddit, there's a presumption that you're talking to someone in America for some reason. That's not factually true. There's no reason that has to be the case. But why do we assume that the common person on the internet is some person in America? It's the same reason we kind of start thinking about a lot of these industries as just being very Eurocentric or America-centric, and it really makes it challenging for independent creatives like us to get anywhere with it. You're finding a very uphill battle.
Yeah, I mean, I totally resonate with that because I think Anarak and I both work on US times. So our our schedule and health is already messed up. It's already fucked up.
Yep.
I mean, it was fucked up before itself, but at least now it's fucked up for a reason.
Yeah, now you're getting paid, so at least there's that.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Yeah. I'm going to be able to pay for the health costs that I'll need after this job is done, is how I'm thinking about it. So,
Exactly. Yeah, so you've DM'd a lot of games and all of that. So I just wanted to ask you, I've asked a previous guest also. So what do you think good DMing is all about?
oh, see, that's a tough question.
I mean, it could be a multitude of reasons. Even
Yeah.
I think the whole thing about being a good DM, I think it could be subjective as well.
It is. I think it's a twofold answer. And the reason it's twofold is it requires, so the most common thing that you'll always hear when someone asks this question is like, what does a good game master, or what does a good dungeon master do? And often the answer is something along the lines of like, you're trying to make sure that your players have a good time and they have a fun time playing this game, right? Like that's like your goal. That's what your goal is supposed to be. But what that means varies table to table, right? And then the other part of it is it often disregards what's the point of being a game master for yourself? Like what are you supposed to get out of it, right? Like that's the other part of it that we don't often think about. So I think when it comes to being a good game master, you are supposed to be a facilitator, a person who is essentially a fun sounding board, or just an echo board that is working with your players to take what they're giving you and then spin it back at them in fun ways so they can always feel engaged, challenged, and rewarded. I would say those are the three words like that I like to think of. Like make them feel like they're being heard, and make them feel like they're being challenged, because often stories are about challenges. They don't have to be about conflict, but you need to have ups and downs in stories, and tabletops are about stories. And then make them feel rewarded, give them a sense of like catharsis, right? So those are the things I feel like a good GM tries to do. But how you do it honestly varies. For a table that really likes a lot of combat, the way you're going to do this is by challenging them mechanically. Other tables who love narrative, you're going to create cool story elements that are going to make them feel challenged and rewarded. And above all of this, there's also the fact that you need to be having fun. So I feel like a good GM also keeps in mind what is it that they want out of the experience. I don't think it works if you constantly go, I want to make sure my players are having a good time, and then you don't think about why you're running the game. And so for me, a lot of the times I want to run games where my players really suffer, but then they feel heroic and cool at the end of it. I love a story where they're just put against unreasonable odds and then come out heroic at the end, and it's like, yeah, we finally did it. That's like the kind of story I really enjoy. But then that
Right.
means my players need to know that, like, that's the kind of adventure I also want them to lean into. They shouldn't be going like, screw it, we're going to burn the town down and then fuck off. I'm like, yeah, you can, but then
But
that's not a
there
game.
are consequences.
Yeah, there are consequences, and also I'm not going to enjoy it. So keep in mind my enjoyment, and then I'll keep in mind your enjoyment. It's a two-way street. So I think a good GM also is honest about their own interests and communicates that. Because otherwise you'll end up being, I think, a grumpy GM at the end of it. After some sessions, you're just like, yeah, you guys did another thing that was not planned, but also now I have nothing to be excited about, and that kind of sucks. So it's a two-way street. But yeah,
Absolutely. Because, I am actually known to, I mean, a I mean, I run 3 campaigns at this point.
man
I'm
alive.
running the Icewind.
3 campaigns. Look at this guy just flexing on us. Meanwhile, I've
Uh,
wrapped up my campaigns. I'm like, I don't have time for running more games right now. I need to like just focus on work, my 5 a.m. meetings as it was. And then this guy's got 3 campaigns going. Okay, tell us about
well,
them.
no, well, I'm running the Icewind Dale campaign. It's
Mhm.
almost ending. Like I'm 2 sessions away from the ending.
Nice.
So I'll be starting a nautical version of Curse of Strahd after that.
Mm.
And then I have 2 more, set in my homebrew world, Axeldon, 500 years apart. Usually, for my game set, what I do to keep the immersion going with text RP, like I just introduce a bunch of NPCs, and through
Mm.
the week they just role play through text before the next
Mm.
session starts. Whenever the session doesn't end on a cliffhanger, which is, well, I'm known to end things on cliffhangers most of the time.
I mean, that's a solid way. I think like endings are something that I think a lot of player GMs forget about. But a good ending is what make sure that your players are excited about the next session, right? You don't want to just fizzle out. So cliffhangers are great, 100%.
Yeah, but you do that, more like if you do that too much, it just gets annoying at a point.
True. You do need to
You-
reward them with an ending every now and then. You do need to,
exactly,
and then give them something else. But
exactly.
but wrap up the story for a bit. You don't want to feel like you're in a 700 episode anime where it's just like, and then this happened. You're like, okay, but I want to stop for a bit.
Exactly. But what I usually do is if I'm ending it, if I don't have a session the next week, I
Yeah.
just tend to end it on a cliffhanger just so that they could just wait for whole
Nice.
2 weeks before the next session starts, just for the
For
fun
sure.
of it.
For
But
sure.
the
Yeah.
point I was making was, I tend to ask these character questions. What does your character fear the most, or what does
Mm.
if your character dies in the next session, what would they regret the most? And those
Mm.
kind of ominous questions just keeps them on their toes. Just
Yeah.
keeps them imagining what I might just throw at them.
Right. I think it's also a good way for them to think about their characters and like what matters to them, right? It's a nice way for them to get into the
Exactly.
role play aspect of it. So I think that's a nice little trick to keep them engaged, not only just to your narrative, but also to who their characters are and why those characters are, interesting to them. So yeah, a solid question. I think whoever's listening, write that down. Write that down.
I mean, the only reason I do this podcast is to get as much knowledge about GMing and role playing as I can. It's just an excuse for me to become a better GM. So yeah.
I love it.
But
The one I love that's the tactic you've decided is like put in more work onto yourself. Love it.
Yeah.
what was
I mean,
your this
yeah.
thing though? What was your best D&D experience though so far, like as a player or as a DM?
Uh, good question. That's a tricky one, right? My favorite experience. I also feel like I have such a long memory of games that at this point they're all starting to blur together. I think there's my first one that is like I think very memorable, which is, and this was when I was playing Pathfinder and I was playing my samurai dwarf, and he was fighting his arch nemesis who was an orc monk. And it wasn't like a dwarf orc rivalry. It was just happened to be that my arch nemesis was an evil guy and he happened to be orc. Um, but we both were very honor bound characters. Like we both had codes of conduct and stuff like that. He had always been more powerful than me, so for many sessions he had been like appearing, teasing me, and then running away and like just basically mocking me. But then he assassinated the king who I cared about, and so the next time I saw him, it was like he managed to essentially disable the rest of the party and make everyone kind of like stuck or trapped. So it came down to a one-on-one showdown between him and me, and he was more powerful, but my character just had a lot of abilities to keep going. And it came down to the final dice roll where I could either choose to take like a health potion and stabilize, because I had basically gotten knocked out, and my character had this ability to come back up to 1 HP. And I could either take that chance to drink a health potion and get a bunch of health and keep going, or I could use that action to do one final hit on my enemy. And I was like, I don't think my character would try to save his ass. He would try to just do land a final blow. And so I swung my axe and I rolled a nat 20, which is, just the quintessential
Yeah.
moment. You're like, you roll the hit and you're like, the whole table goes wild. I did critical amount of damage. It was crazy. And yeah, he fell to his death, and I walked away thinking that, okay, cool, I've lived, I've survived this, right? Because I have that 1 HP and I've done enough damage that he's not going to be able to kill me, so I'm going to walk away. And what I didn't realize was that he had done what was the monk equivalent of like the 5 palm finger technique, like the one from Kill Bill where it's basically they
Yeah.
strike you like in 5 specific places, 5-star finger technique, something like that. So as soon as I finished walking to my friends and checking on them, I collapsed, and it's because my heart had exploded. And so my character also fell to his death. But it was so dramatic and glorious and like kind of poetic in that moment that it felt like, yeah, that's how he would go. He would save his friends, he would defeat his arch nemesis, and they would both fall to their deaths, and that's it. And especially for my character who had always been like a bit of a recluse, because a bit of a I don't care about other people. I'm here to just do the right thing and move on. For him to like be like, shit, I'm dying, and I actually wish I had more time with my friends. That felt very kind of like a good poetic wrap up moment. So probably that one, just because it was my kind of it just stayed with me. Very powerful stuff.
That
That
is,
is pretty damn cool.
really good. That's actually a really good story thing. I might, just yoink it.
Go for it.
But yeah, that is actually amazing. Speaking of character deaths, though, have you read this book called The Midnight Library?
Yeah. It's the one with the lady who gets to go through multiple lives, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
So in my homebrew games, right, I've done this whole death mechanic even before the character is revivified, which is an instantaneous spell. We
Yeah.
have this whole mechanic where once the character dies, they go into this limbo between life and afterlife,
Mm,
where basically the character gets the choice between coming back with the revivify or just passing on.
sure.
And they meet one of their loved ones. They go through each and every regret in their life, each and everything that
Damn.
life could have been.
Right.
So I just took it from this whole midnight library thing, and this K drama called Goblin.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So I just once you mentioned once you mentioned your character died, so I thought this might be a good time to just interject with this whole story part.
I love it. I've been taking inspiration from other media is like such a quintessential part of TTRPGs, right? Like there are whole games that have been built just because they were inspired by a certain piece of media. D&D was inspired by Lord of the Rings and a lot of that kind of high fantasy. Blades in the Dark was inspired by Dishonored and Peaky Blinders. And so stealing from other media is totally a solid way to kind of create your own thing. And yeah, makes for a lot of fun.
Yeah, one of my Call of Cthulhu games was actually taken from a song.
Nice.
Literally saw, listened to the song. I saw, I know, learned about the whole tradition. It's called the Mummer's Dance by Lorena
Yeah.
McKinnon.
Hmm.
And I the whole mumming tradition seemed very interesting to me, and I thought, why not just create a whole horror game out of it? And yeah,
That
I came out with a very horrifying
nice.
game actually.
Nice. That sounds awesome. I mean, I think I've seen you post quite a few times where I'm like, you've even mentioned some of your inspiration for where this possible adventure is coming from, and it's great. Like, I think that's a solid way to go about creating this stuff. And I mean, so much of the campaign that I used to run came from like me just watching other media and going, oh, that's a cool idea. That's a cool idea. I should use that. I should use that. 100%.
Absolutely. I mean, it's not like we just generate our ideas out of nowhere. So let me just, we'll just stop with the whole flow of this discussion, and we'll just have a tiny game, okay? Just a few questions. I think around 7 of them. A rapid fire thing. I'll just give you 2 choices. Just choose as fast as you can.
Okay. Sure.
Hmm?
Let's do this.
All right. D&D or Pathfinder?
Pathfinder.
Sorcerer or Warlock? Yeah.
Warlock.
All right. Homebrew or published materials?
Homebrew.
Online or offline?
Offline.
Linear storylines or sandbox?
Linear. Controversial choice, I think, but yes.
I'll get back to that with you.
Yeah.
Barbarian or fighters?
Ooh, barbarian.
So you're more of a tank person than a caster, right?
100%. Nine out of 10 times I want to be like, that did nothing to me, and then just keep fighting. So yeah.
Because I'm usually the caster. I'm the bard who just annoys people.
Love it.
Not the
Yes.
whole horny bard trope, but
Yeah.
I usually play the the lawful good guy.
Nice. Yeah, I'm also a big lawful good guy. I've been trying to not play that for a while, just because I'm so used to playing it. But yeah, I like to play a lawful good, tanky, big guy, who just wants to be like big and cuddly and do good things. That's kind of my.
So
trope.
Grog.
Grog is a solid, a little smarter than Grog. Uh, Also, Grog is not very lawful good. Like, Grog, when he started out, was just pure chaos. He just happens to land up with. Even Vox Machina is actually very chaotic. Like, they do not always do the right thing. So, but yeah, I would say, like, yeah, Grog is a good example. And Druss from the Draenei series by David Gemmell was actually, like, my first character that I fell in love with. I was like, that's a really cool idea for a character. And so, a lot of the times, I kind of model myself around that. Yeah.
Yeah. I've created my character from like my first character was based on Jiraiya from Naruto.
Oh yeah,
I created a half-orc druid. I don't know how I
Nice.
related that to Naruto, but yeah, it worked.
After Druss, it was One Piece that I took a lot of inspiration from. Like for me, just having the whole like team nakama kind of idea of like one group of friends that everyone like they go on adventuring. Big fan of that whole idea. And shonen mangas are really good for that kind of stuff. So, hell, what's Full Metal Alchemist? The brother's name, not Edward. The Alfonso.
I think it's Alfonso. I haven't seen the complete show
Alfonso,
yet.
yeah. I think that's.
I would say that's a good example of a character that I would like to play. Like a big suit of armor who's always worried about his elder brother who's getting way in over his head.
I did play a Warforged Barbarian druid once, like a multi-class.
Yeah.
So just because this whole Warforged was made on metal on one side, the barbarian side, and made of wood on the other side. So which is the druid side of it.
Yeah.
So basically he's split half and half into metal and wood, and so.
Very cool. Nice. I love that. We have a barbarian in our campaign who is now multi-classed into a druid, and that's a really bad idea on an optimal level. Just because every time he rages, shapeshifts as an animal, he has to drop his rage, and then when he's raging, he can't cast any of his druid spells, so he always has to drop his rage. And it's a very unoptimal choice, but it's hilarious. And also, now he's this big burly guy who's just wearing a bunch of wooden planks as armor. And it's a beautiful image. I'm a big fan of it. So I love that metal being overtaken by nature aesthetic. It's great.
That is actually a really good trope, though. You have multi classes that don't pan out well. I had
Yeah.
my friend, right? He once played a barbarian warlock.
Mm-hmm.
So he
Yeah.
met his patron when he fell into a pit,
Right.
and somehow made a pact with him to get out of the pit, and that's it. He became a warlock.
That's
Well,
wild.
I have always imagined these tropes.
Yeah.
Friends who are patrons of each other, warlock patrons of each other,
Yeah.
literally having magic with the power of friendship.
Yeah.
Your friend,
That's cool.
your friends for the whole treasure you found on the way. That
Mm-hmm.
that kind of a trope, or a
Nice.
family full of warlocks. The whole Fast and Furious family.
Mm. Nice. I am loving all of these ideas, and I think it just goes to show how you can pull from other pieces of media and come up with wacky things, but also like this is what like a novel like that, right? Like a family full of warlocks that are inspired by Fast and Furious. A story like that is never getting made in terms of like publication or film, right? No one's putting
Exactly.
money behind that. But you can totally go and have your own adventure and play that story out and have it live in your head for the rest of your life. And that's great. That's what I like. I was just talking the other day to a friend, and we were talking about how the big joy of like being world builders is that we get to make all our wacky worlds and we don't have to worry about filling them with characters that are going to live out a great story. That's the player's job. So instead of having to write a novel, like I don't, so for example, if you're writing Mistborn, you need to come up with Scandriel, right? You need to come up with that
Yeah.
whole world. And then you also need to come up with really good characters that are going to make that world, that whole novel come together. When you're running a tabletop game, you just come up with a world, and then the players come up with their own cool characters. And 7 sessions in, you've played out a good story, and it's all done and wrapped. And I mean, that's a great experience. It's such a liberating thing to be able to just come up with your own thing like that and have it
Absolutely.
live in your head.
I mean, I made a character. In fact, I made a warlock.
Yeah,
In fact, I made a like a funny reel about it as well.
yeah.
But like a warlock whose patron was a customer service executive, sort of
Mm.
a that sort of a feeling, and who was always trying to just, hey, take this as I'm your patron. You can take this. Like trying to sell you some scheme. Always trying
Oh
to sell
man,
you
man.
some scheme.
Just a guy with a trench coat is like, hey, would you like some deals?
Yeah, exactly. That sort of a patron. I
I
didn't
love
get.
it.
Speaking of
I haven't
French,
gotten to play him yet, but yeah.
Nice.
speaking of trench coats, so I've always wanted to play this whole, goblins standing over each other in a trench
Oh
coat.
man, you know that there is a Grant Howitt game which is just three kobolds and a trench coat, right? And you get to play as three kobolds. Like the players are all, each of them is a different kobold. It is an absolute blast to play. 100% check it out. It's such a fun thing to play.
What is it called again?
I mean, just Google Grant Howitt kobolds in a trench coat. I don't remember what
Didn't
it's
he
called.
also make Honey Heist? Was he the
Yes,
one? Yeah,
Honey Heist and
yeah,
a bunch. Grand Habits, all their one-page RPGs they
yeah,
make are available for free on Twitter and on their Patreon. They just like publish one whenever, and you can just download any of them for free and play
yeah.
it. I use
Um,
them for like my classes. I was teaching a class writing, and they weren't being able to get into like into the scene and think like characters because they were still thinking as writers who were just making people move like puppets. And I'm like, no, you got to think like in the characters. What would the characters do? And so we picked up a random Grant Howitt game. We picked up Himbo Treasure Hunt. And it's a bunch of himbos, gym bros, who are essentially trying to find treasure so that their gym doesn't get bought out by a big corporation. And I was running it at
uh-huh.
a all girls college, so we had like three femme people who were just like pretending to be three hardcore gym bros, and they were able to really get into characters, have wacky ideas, and play this game out. I mean, that's again, it just goes to show you can play such wacky ideas in tabletop games, and you can do a one shot. Not everything has to be a campaign, and then have fun.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because one of my friends, she actually played a bard who was
Yeah,
an influencer
yeah,
who, just goes around, just streaming everything, doing
I
a whole
love
live
it.
stream of everything by, all over the adventure. But yeah, but moving on. So I think, we've talked about your whole, experience as a DM and everything. So I just wanted to know, like, if you have any tips for the, budding game masters out there.
Honestly, I think there's a lot of really good tips out there, like Sly Flourish, who's known as who's written the la-
Lazy Dungeon Master thing.
yeah, Lazy Dungeon Master's Guide, has a great YouTube channel, and the whole Lazy Dungeon Master's Guide is mostly available on their blog. You don't even need to buy the book. You can just read their blog and get all the keynotes out of it. Matt Colville's Running the Game YouTube series. Brendan Lee Mulligan's Dimension 20's like just running the game. I think there's all of these great YouTube series and podcasts and articles. And I think they have so much insight into running the game that I could, before that I could, um, I don't think I could add anything new. But I think something that I would add is that if you're trying to run a game, if you're thinking about, hey, I want to be a game master, or I have friends and someone needs to run the game, let go of that part of you that is worried about doing it right, about trying to run what you think is a good game, like is worried about that, and just try to have fun. Like play because you want to play something cool, and just play that. And have a conversation at the start of the table that goes along the lines of, we're all here to have fun. I want to do something cool. You all want to do something cool. We're going to try make each other feel cool. And if we get stuck, we'll just ask each other, what's the next best thing to do? Instead of being someone who has to figure it all out in your head or in your notebook before you run the game, and who can't ask the players for any help. I just feel like that puts so much pressure on the game masters and makes you have to be someone who just knows everything, and is perfect and can't make any mistakes, and it just makes it a very stressful experience, right? And there's all this advice, and then you read all of this advice, and you watch Matt Mercer, or you watch Brendan D. Mulligan, or you watch Abria Iyengar, any of them run games, and you go, wow, they're incredible. I need to do that. And no, you don't. You are playing a game with your friends. Just play a game with your friends. Just have fun. Play something that's cool for you, and that's going to be enough. That's honestly all you need to be doing, is just playing. That word play means has a lot of weight, and we forget about it because we've stopped being kids, right? We've grown up. We are all adults now. I'm a grown up, and I'm going to be an adult, and I'm going to run serious TTRPGs. Yeah, but the whole point of it was to play. It was what kids used to do. I used to pretend that this random rod was a staff and I can cast spells. That's what you want to go back to. And if you do that, then the rest I think becomes a lot easier. If you pick up a stick and goes, this is a sword, and everyone goes, yes, it is a sword, that's all you need, right? Like then you can just play.
Absolutely. Yeah, that is a really good tip. It felt like, well, I actually resonated with it because,
Yeah.
I've had this whole experience where, I didn't
Yeah.
feel like I DM'd well enough for, like, good enough for the players to enjoy. But,
Yeah.
that's actually a really good piece of advice.
I'm glad.
Anyways,
That is.
I think we are almost, getting to the end of the episode.
Sure.
So initially, first of all, I want to thank you for actually, agreeing to do this. And yeah, because Bases has been a really good, part of my whole, life as a dungeon master. I mean, I've always DM'd. I've rarely played. So yeah, Bases has
Uh,
been a huge part of my life as a DM. So
I'm
it's,
really glad. I'm happy to chat, happy to talk about this stuff, happy to hear all your cool ideas that you have going, from your wacky character ideas to your wacky campaign ideas. I think it's a blast that you're still coming up with all of those things and excited about running games. I sometimes, because I've made so much of this my work, I'm on most days I'm like, I'm going to go read a book now, and I don't want to think about rolling dice for a bit. It's great to hear this stuff, and I'm really glad that Daisies has allowed you to kind of be a DM and have all of this fun. It's honestly like the best situation to find ourselves. It's a compliment to us, really, more than anything. And I hope this podcast, and I hope your games continue to prosper, man. It's going to be great to see you both have a bunch of fun doing all that you want to do.
thank you, man.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But yeah, I think that is about it for this episode. Aman, do you have anything to add?
I was just happy to sit and listen, man. In real life, also, I'm more of a listener than a talker. Listeners who have listened to the past few episodes, I mean, we only have currently one out right now, but yeah, hey, it's the future.
Sure. Future listeners,
Future.
coming
It's
back
the-
to your original beginning of the podcast.
I'm way good of a listener than I am a talker. And that's specifically why I took up DMing, is because I have I have listened so much. There is so much content in this brain. Just need to get that out in some form of fashion. Otherwise, I'll go mad. In fact, hearing what you said about DMing, always talking to Anurag about DMing this, our styles, the worlds that we create. It in fact gives me a lot of confidence in my DMing now than it did before. So yeah, really appreciate you being here, talking to us, and yeah, hope to run more games on DCs and Infinite and TPK and literally everywhere.
Nice. I hope you have a blast.
All
Most
right,
definitely.
all right then, listeners. That was Shubham with our fourth episode of the Infinite Tavern podcast. And yeah, it was really fun, Shubham. Thanks for doing this, and I hope I see you all next week. Until then,
Yeah.
may your dice rolls
Make
be
sure to
great.
tune in. And if you tune in, you will roll a nat 20.
Or an Act 1 if it's a D100 system.
Sure, that too.